Fantastic. And welcome back to Curious Faith. I am your host, Bill Wallace, and thank you so much as we continue these conversations for people thinking about following Jesus. We love just having questions kind of centered around what it means to be a Jesus follower. What are the challenges with following Jesus in our world today? And I'm really excited for our conversation that we are having today with a first-time guest who I'd like to welcome in at this time. Hey, hello.
Hey, Bill. How's it going?
I'm really good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
This is an awesome first time in the room.
First time in the palatial Curious Faith studios here.
Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, for our video listeners who are able to see you and our podcast listeners, why don't you introduce yourself if you wouldn't mind?
Sure, yeah. Well, my name is Mike Reynolds, and I'm a pastor, although I'm not currently pastoring. Before the whole COVID shutdown, we took a break to relaunch our church. Didn't relaunch during COVID because obviously, what a terrible time to launch a church.
Yeah, kind of a challenge. Yeah.
But I've been working outside of the church for years and years now, and so I'm the general manager at a golf course that is owned by a group of homes, and so I get to manage that. I get to do golf lessons. I get to coach a high school golf team, which is one of my favorite things in the world as well. So
yeah. That's so cool. So yeah, like you really work, not like me, I sit around and jockey a desk all day, you've actually been doing two hats for a long time.
Yeah, well, and you and I, the first time we met, we vibed because you and I have a lot of parallels.
Yes.
Because not only do we both pastor, but you coach drama and all that at the middle school and thought it was a good idea to get in the community that way. Mm-hmm. That's how I got in this whole golf thing.
Yeah.
Was just by coaching golf in the high school.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I never dreamed of any kind of career in it for sure, but it's just kind of how it worked out.
Nice. No, and I totally agree, actually. That was one of the great joys for me is that my church here, Hope, has always supported me being in the community, that they actually would hate it if they thought I was here 40 hours a week, but,
right.
Would rather see me out there making an impact and, pouring into kids particularly.
That's awesome. Yeah. And did you ever do youth ministry? I never even asked that.
I did.
Okay,
yeah. Back when my hair wasn't quite as gray, played guitar, did all that, had a great time with that.
Yeah. No, I had hair when I did youth ministry too. But,
seems to be a window there, right?
Yeah. Getting into school is I miss youth ministry so much, and it gets you a little, that fill of being around kids and students and people who are growing and asking cool questions too.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, cool. Thank you for joining on the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. That's honestly that's probably kind of good impact. Hey, we always do a get to know you question.
Oh no.
So actually, I was going to go in a different direction. Now that you brought that up, since we're both youth ministry veterans, right? What was your go-to mixer game, starter game, all those things like that? And I always answer the question first because I've thought of it. So I will say, for me, it was Poop Deck. Did you ever play Poop Deck?
I don't know Poop Deck.
Poop Deck is where, and I would say we always play Poop Deck because it's fun to say Poop Deck. You would just divide your space into 3 different decks, like on a ship. You have the main deck, the quarter deck, and the poop deck. And whichever one you called, all the kids had to run to that deck, and whoever was last there, got out. And it was just a chance to run and be silly and say Poop Deck a lot. So we played that a bunch.
I think when I was in school, probably still now, like one of my least favorite things in the world was mixer games.
Yes.
I hated it because, when you don't know people, remember the first day of school or whatever, or the first day like at a youth group, you're like, and now they're going to make me do something crazy. I'll tell you my least favorite.
Yeah.
I got to tell you my least favorite. Because I remember I had this youth pastor who had this game called, do you know what Shuffle Buns is?
Yes.
You sit in a circle. It's like musical chairs, but you end up going a certain number of chairs and you end up sitting on somebody's lap.
Yes.
And it's still...
Could there be anything more awkward as a junior high kid?
To this day, I cannot figure out how youth pastors got away with going, okay, let's have this high school girl sit on this middle school boy's lap right now. Everybody comfortable? Everybody getting to know each other? Like, oh gosh, that was awful.
Yeah. Ideal environment.
I don't know that I ever came up with a great mixer game. We always did because I was introverted, and so I was always like let's do one where somebody could just answer a couple questions about themselves. You know, we'll keep it low key. You know, and I don't know if I ever succeeded at that.
Poop deck was different than that.
Poop deck is different. Shuffle buns and poop deck.
Right. Right. Yeah, but yeah. Boy, at least we weren't sitting on each other for that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Our topic for today, let's dive into that, is why does Hollywood seem to do a better job of telling our story? So yes, on the list of many things that actually we definitely vibe on. We both have a love for Hollywood, movies and TV shows, and deep dive within that. And part of that comes from that we often, I think, both see Jesus within kind of the stories that are being told, right? We joke that we could talk about Star Wars the entire time.
Yeah.
But that actually gets to it right away, you know? I think for a lot of people, they want maybe an in-your-face kind of Jesus story. And those can be really cool. You know, those can be done well. But I'm always seeing Jesus in all kinds of stuff that's out there. And one of the first times where I realized, you know what, I'm just going to lean into that and really accept that, because it opens up so many conversations. It was years ago, back when I tried to stay a little more hip on MTV and everything that they were talking about. So there was a show, called Real World and Road Rules and all those things like that.
I remember those well.
And I remember watching this Real World episode where there's this girl in Las Vegas, and she's just, it's new to the show, and she's had this terrible breakup. And then she actually goes and she tries to call her dad to get some sympathy and to get some comfort from him, and he's disappointed that she's on this show, and so he actually, it's a very awkward conversation, and they do the little one-on-one to the camera, right afterwards, and she's just crying, and so sad and so broken because this relationship that hasn't gone well, and then has received nothing from her dad in response, and she's just crying. She says, "You know what? I just wish someone would love me unconditionally." And I'm like, oh, that's Jesus. Hello. Hello. And people can say they're playing it for the camera. I'm seeing a kid in pain. I'm seeing a kid who absolutely is making this plea to be loved unconditionally. And I'm like, man, I want to have that conversation. Let's jump into that instead of pretend like all that's bad, terrible stuff.
Yeah. Which would have been actual reality TV, if you could have those actual conversations. Yeah. And I don't know, was Real World, was that the first reality show?
It was one of the first,
Okay, yeah, I know it was like
MTV kind of
on.
billed it as that.
But yeah, you're watching that stuff and you see people's authentic feelings and thoughts, and you're like, there's something there when you're like, I wish, I think I've got an answer, or I think I've got some help, and I wish I could just invade this person's life and help them.
Go right in. So yeah, for me, that was it. I was like, all right, I'm going to look for the Jesus story and all this, and I'm going to see where that connects. And it drives me a little crazy because, we within the church, I truly do believe, have the greatest story ever told. As cheesy as that sounds, I think we really do have the Jesus. It's the greatest story ever told. And I think Hollywood tells our story better than us all the time. And I wanted to start by looking at the movie Armageddon.
Oh, no.
Right? Brilliant asteroid movie. The giant asteroid is coming down to destroy the earth. The world is going to be destroyed. It's going to be devastated. And who can they look to in order to save the world?
Not Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. No. It has to be Bruce Willis, right, to come in and save the day. And again, if you haven't seen this movie, it actually holds up surprisingly well. I mean, for all it is. But the end if you haven't watched it, big spoiler coming right now. At the end, Ben Affleck has to stay on the asteroid and he has to do all this. And so he has this tender-hearted moment between, essentially his adopted dad, Ben Affleck, who's been dating Bruce Willis's daughter, and Ben Affleck draws a short straw. He has to stay. Bruce Willis takes him down to the asteroid, hits him on the head, sends him back up into the ship, and takes his place so that he can literally sacrifice himself in order to save the whole world. I mean, could not be any more of a Jesus story if they smacked us over the head with it.
Yeah.
And this movie makes hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a meme. It's all these kinds of things. There's the Aerosmith song that comes out of it and all this. I'm like,
Don't want to close my eyes?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, okay.
yeah. Don't want to miss a thing.
Don't want to miss a thing.
Don't want to miss a thing, right? It is. It's a Jesus story, right?
Totally, yeah,
And and how does that make hundreds of millions of dollars? And Bruce Willis gets all this fame and glory from that, and we can't tell that story.
Yeah, no, I get it, because I'm vibing with that too, because the redemption story.
Yes.
I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, and like you and I could go in about Star Wars and talk about the redemption of Anakin or any of that. Right. And there's something that just like you're saying, in the real world, it's so authentic. People crave it, and you see people craving it, and you know that they're making these movies because they know that people are dying for redemption stories.
Oh, yes.
They want to see it in their own life, and then they're going to see it in Hollywood. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
Right.
Yeah, because the redemption of these, these kind of scuzzy oil workers and the whole thing. I love that somebody can come from that place to, to make the ultimate sacrifice or to do the big job that's necessary.
And I think that's part of it, right? It's the Bruce Willis everyman.
Yeah.
Hey, I would do that too. I would save the kid. I would save the world. I would go into space in order to blow up the asteroid, right? And,
right.
And that's part of that appeal.
Right. And it wasn't the pastor.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't the guy who got his MDiv or whatever. It was like this crass talking dirty guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And somehow, Hollywood has figured it out that people are drawn to that again because they're drawn to the Jesus story. But if they package it in this other way, then somehow they're telling it in a way that engages people on so many different levels, in a way that we seem to struggle to.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, I had a conversation not too long ago with a friend that I work with, and he knows that I've been in ministry for years and years and years, and he's very, very atheist. He's very, very, and he tries to figure out every way in which he can kind of, rub that in my face and say, this is why I don't believe. He'll point at stuff in the news. That's why I don't believe. And so we're having this conversation, and we're talking about kind of the theme of redemption, and more about the theme of how we could take part in other people's redemption. And so I told him a story about a small group that I knew about. They got together, and I forget how long they were meeting for, but for every meeting, every person just dropped a little bit of money in the middle, and nobody took it. It was just kind of like, we're just kind of putting this in an envelope. We're saving this, we're saving this, we're saving this. After 5 or 6 meetings, they got together and found they had like $700 in the envelope from these families that were meeting together, these couples. And they were doing this because they wanted to go bless somebody, So then they sat down as a group, and they brought their kids into it, and they're like, we've got, $700. How could we bless somebody? What could we do? And so I guess one of the kids chimed in with an idea of a family that they could go that really needed some help financially. They needed, one of them even said they need a babysitter on like a night a week or something like that. So the whole small group kind of adopted this family without telling them like, we are, adopting your family. And they kind of pooled their resources to do this. They started with the $700. And his family, not a churched family, not somebody that they had ever known to go to church, starts getting their lives changed by this. And because of it, like the father really has this redemption in his own life. And I won't tell you the whole story, but he'd had some like kind of sinful, kind of dark things going on, and really, came to, this group of friends to say, I've got friends now. Wow. I've got real friends who really care about me. They eventually, started to go to the church, and, that's a cool part of the story, but the redemption thing was so cool. But I'm telling this to this atheist, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not, hyping up the fact that, eventually they made spiritual big decisions in their lives. And this guy goes, oh, I'd get in on that in a second. He goes, you put me in charge of that. If I was in church, if I didn't have to talk about Jesus, if I didn't have to like make a big deal about Jesus or the Bible or anything, and I could just do that, he's like, I would do it, because the redemption story in that was so appealing to this guy,
Yes. Oh my gosh.
But that's the whole thing with stories and with, people just crave, redemption. And,
they do.
Yeah.
And they're looking, I think, for their role to play within that, right?
Yeah.
Which is what we need to then figure out. How do we invite people into that? How does that happen? Man, I'm really. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's a story. I kind of share it in some ways in a lot of different circles because I'm like, man, what a cool way to have a group of families, just decide what family could we adopt and bless. That's just such a cool thought. And I've heard of cool stories even during the pandemic of people looking in on other people. And my mom had a cool story back in she lives across the water and she was like, this group of people from church just decided we're going to check on, single older folks. I don't want to call her elderly, but and she was like, what a cool thing, to pool your resources to help somebody like that. So.
Yeah. Ah, nice. So, all right. So again, why is Hollywood doing that better? Why are they telling that story better than us? Because they got more money? Because they're more authentic at it, right? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. Oh man, and that is a good question. Like, why is it told so much better than we can tell it? And I think it really comes down to. I mean, part of it comes down to the fact that it's fiction, right? And you can make the story and you can tell the story,
right? When you can craft it to make it all just fits and lines up perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, and still nobody in Hollywood, or in fiction period could ever write a story with more sacrifice than the story of a God, who loves his world and his creation. So, nobody could ever come up with a story bigger and more redemptive and sacrificial than that. But, when you've got those, the ability to use fiction and to use, zoomed in cameras on somebody's, feelings
right.
and to get Steven Tyler to sing a song. I mean, there's something about that too, and like I was listening to your podcast the other day about music.
Yes.
And you guys were talking about the power of music and the power it has on people. And, even there, that song is as corny as it could, I mean, right?
Name it for what it is. Yeah.
It's pretty corny. But when you watch it, chills go down your actual spine.
You're drawn in.
Yeah.
You're drawn in. Let's lean into that from a soundtrack standpoint. For me, one of the most powerful, Jesus, redemptive, sacrificial storylines comes out of the Iron Giant, if you remember that old cartoon. Right? Great cartoon. Fantastic movie. A little under the radar, because it wasn't Disney. And I don't know what your experience was, but it was mine where I would talk with people who had seen it, and they'd be like, "No, oh, you've seen it." It was like this hidden gem.
I hate to admit I have not seen the whole thing.
Really?
I hate to admit it because I know I even saw a reference to it the other day, and people were crying about it. So.
That's it. That's totally it. It was. And there's like this little underground group of folks that have done that. Well, the Iron Giant, actually is very clearly kind of a Superman metaphor. Which, of course, is a Jesus metaphor. And in terms of that, now you haven't seen it, so I'm not going to give it away.
Sorry,
but there's a scene at the end where all those things you said. It's animation too, especially. So they're able to do a close up on the giant. There's this stirring, music going on in the background, and he says one line, and it's like I'm crying over a cartoon. As a grown man who's seen this movie way too many times, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful how it is bringing me into that moment with all of those elements kind of going on at the same time. Yeah, we should pause and watch this movie and then come right back.
I feel like I need to go look it up on streaming right now. So,
Right? Do we, when done well, Armageddon it's fun, it's cheesy. I think part of what appealed about the Iron Giant, was that it felt smaller, it felt authentic, it felt like there was some depth maybe going on, that it didn't just feel Hollywoody. Right. If I could use it as a term. I think that's part of the challenge for the church is I've been at churches, I assume you have as well, that have felt a little more Hollywoody. And for me, man, that doesn't ring, It's really cool when we can do all the lights and the bells, and we can do all that stuff. That's really fun. Yeah. But for me individually, I don't know that feels real.
Yeah, I've come full circle on that.
Yeah?
I think there was a point in my life where I thought the more well-produced, the more, the better sound, the better quality musicians you have up there. I mean, you want your speaker to be like a stand-up comic and your band to be like,
Yeah.
a Grammy award winning, and I even wondered that about, during the pandemic, where people who, could be watching Hope or watching some other church, were they, did they start tuning into one of the big mega churches and go, oh, the music quality is just amazing on this, whatever. And I wondered, and I don't think I saw that happen as much as I thought it would. I thought that maybe, those online things would just explode. And it really didn't necessarily happen. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. I had that kind of phase of my ministry where I thought, if we just produce this better, if we just make the service tighter, it's going to reach more people. And I think it's the authenticity that does, the ability to say, hey, this message might run over by 5 minutes, but I'm going here.
Yeah.
Like, this is powerful, and I'm seeing heads nod, and like we're going there with this one, and I know that that's a tough thing for some people, because some people are like, oh, I want the sermon to be as short as possible so we can get out of there and watch a football game. But like when it's the authentic, and you see it in the band, when you've got a worship leader, and Brandon now very well, and I feel so blessed to have been Brandon's friend and ministry partner for years and years. You see somebody so authentic like Brandon, somebody who lives it out in the way that he, walks his walk in the world. And then to see him get up there and, choke up about a song, or to say, I was going to go with this, but I decided to do this instead, and this is why it touched me. I mean, that stuff is always so powerful to me. And I think it does. It reaches out to people, because it says, hey, this emotionally moves like real human beings. This isn't like, we're not up here faking it for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. So just to lean into that then, right? You're right. I was with you actually during the whole quarantine. One of the self-care things I did, I will freely admit, is I didn't watch what other people were doing on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I knew I would beat myself up, and I would compare myself to what other folks were going on. And normally I listen to other pastors and do much more of that. And I didn't for the last 15 months because I didn't want to see
Right. Yeah.
and start getting into that trap of, oh no, that was so much better, and oh, we got to do this, and oh, I've got to do that. It was healthier for me to not do that.
Totally.
How wild is that, right?
Well, the comparison trap you and I know in ministry, and that's such a thing. And in any spot in life, you're always comparing yourself to someone else.
Yeah. And honestly, I think this last year was really bad for that, because you would see these people who are just, cruising through quarantine, doing, learning 5 languages and doing all this other stuff, and
bench pressing 300, because they're at home every day doing it,
Right. And again, I will say, me and my family, we did not have a tough quarantine compared to the rest of the world. And we felt a little sheepish. We didn't always say that, because you know what, we're doing okay, and we're getting along, and we knew people that really were, and we didn't want to be part of that. Of just kind of saying, hey man, if you're having a tough time, I want to be there for you, and and see how I can help with that. So tough stuff. So yeah, do we do a better job then if we see ourselves as the small indie Sundance movie made on a shoestring budget?
Right.
Is that need to be what we go for? Does even that become? Does that become part of the show, Yeah. Hey, look, we're intentionally indie. We're intentionally under the radar, Does that become part of the gig?
I think, it's not necessarily about, impacting the most amount of people or the most amount of lives, but, how can you impact lives the most, or whatever, and that's whatever you're watching or whatever fiction you're reading, or whether it's a show or a movie or even church. I mean, I don't think art or faith should ever be judged by how many seats, how many dollars at the box office.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was, wasn't like Avatar like the #1 grossing movie of all time
Yes.
at one point or
Yes,
something
it
like
is. $2 billion.
And if somebody made the argument to me that was the greatest movie of all time,
I
I'd be
kind of
throwing
want you
hands
just
on that
to try
one.
and be a devil's advocate, but I really can't.
Oh man, but it's not about how many dollars or how many.
Yeah.
It's about like, well, what if we lean into this one person, and I think that's where maybe even this quarantine in some ways would have been good for some people in saying, hey, I'm not going to be the YouTube pastor or the YouTube star, but I've got these connections with these people in my home, or these people that this smaller number of people I can be connected with, and how can I see the most change, or how can I see the most impact in them? I'm sure Hollywood will never be there, because Hollywood's always going to be about the the bucks, right?
Yes, and what I've found fascinating from a TV standpoint, from when you and I were kids to now, think of how many different channels and therefore how many different shows. Like, there's a part of Hollywood that has figured that out. That I don't know if you've watched Ted Lasso
Yes.
as an example.
In fact, that was one that I was going to bring for today. So okay.
Well, you could do that, but think of that and the impact that show makes, and the audience of that is what, 1/10 of
I wonder.
Family Ties, or Cheers, or what are the great the A-Team, some show that we watched maybe as we were kids.
Sure.
Ted Lasso doesn't have near that footprint, but the impact that it makes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was, when you had mentioned to me about like places, excuse me, TV or movies where you find something that's really powerful, spiritually. Ted Lasso, obviously, I don't think there's any. Maybe there's a reference to faith in there, but I don't remember it. But it was truly about impacting people's lives.
Yes.
And that whole theme of, it's not about the wins or losses, or the ties, because it's soccer.
Because it's soccer,
which is a joke.
Right. You got that over here. Yeah. I'm gonna have to get used to that.
It's not about that, but it's about the guys on the team, and it's about the team and impacting people. And I love that theme of that show. It was. Even though I don't know that I could recommend it to kids, because it is pretty, it crosses some vulgar lines.
Some of the vulgar lines are
but
terribly funny, but not appropriate.
But when you walk away from that show, you're just like, I want to be more like Ted Lasso.
Yes.
I want to bring that level of encouragement to other people. I want when I walk out of a room, I want people to go, wow. Like, and they show so many scenes where Ted Lasso is in with the boss. I don't remember her name.
Yes.
But he's in with her, and he brings her the biscuits and all that, and then he leaves, and she's always like awestruck, just kind of spellbound by like, I can't believe I just had that interaction with this. That guy was, just did something so kind, and she is kind of deviously scheming behind his back at the time, but then. Redemption story, right? She has she turns a big corner at the end. So,
there's I wish I could remember the line. There's a line that he says to the reporter, that reporter meeting that he has.
Trent Krim.
Yes.
From The Independent.
Yes, from The Independent. Where he says, I don't want you to misunderstand me. When I say it's not about the wins and losses, it's not that I don't think that's important, but what would be worse? That, or to never have someone who believed in you as you grew up.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, right?
Yep.
I mean, who cares if you won a football game? If you had someone who believed in you, that changes lives.
Yeah, and thinking about that too, just, whether you think about congregants in a church, or, people that I work with on a daily basis, going, do they feel like, do they have the feeling that anybody has that kind of faith in them?
Yeah.
And you and I have tried to teach for our whole lives. We always try to teach. People should have faith in God, but probably don't even talk enough about how much faith God has in people, you know, and the fact that, you know, the reason why, you know, Jesus, you know, ascended back to heaven was so we would be his incarnation, you know, so that we would be the one, you know, he put that trust in us. He said, I'm leaving you and I'm giving you my Spirit because I'm going to trust you to do this, to love others and to believe in others. And, you know, that's one of the things I have to challenge myself with daily, you know, now that I'm not like, you know, working in the church all the time, you know, because you can get down by the world and, you know, but like trying to have that impact on people to go, I hope they know that I hope I am actually believing in them and communicating that I am. So.
Yeah. Funny enough, that's part of my message here this upcoming Sunday is that, you know, this reality that again, one of the crazy things about this particular story, this true story, this Jesus story, is that although he could have done all of this on his own, he invites us to participate with him in it.
Yeah.
Right? So that it isn't just the Jesus story. It is the Jesus story with Mike playing a role, and with Bill playing a role, and Sarah playing a role, and Kim playing a role, and so on and so on. And that is bonkers.
Right.
You know, it's a Hollywood blockbuster off the scale that, no, wait, you got a part. You need to be here. I need you here to be a part of this.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like as we read the New Testament, as we read the book of Acts, you know, it's, you know, Jesus trusted these goofy apostles, right? These weirdos, these, you know.
What was he thinking?
Yeah, and then you think he's still doing that now. I mean, the book of Acts is kind of not over, you know, and he's still doing it, and you know, we talk about the big movie or the big story, and it's like, man. I wish I understood more often that I could be a part of a big story, you know, and you are when you follow. But it's
there it is. Thank you. Good conversation.
Yeah,
good conversation. We're getting close to our wrap up.
Oh my goodness!
I know.
Are we seriously?
Went super quick. Were there any Hollywood stories that we didn't get to that you really wanted to make sure you threw out there?
Well, I mean, I do like a lot of them, and I was going to mention. In my years in ministry, I've used a lot of video clips in church, and the two movies I've used the most, Dumb and Dumber, number one without a doubt, number one with a bullet.
Fantastic.
And well, there's so many things you can show.
Oh my gosh.
And number two is a movie that if you know about this movie, I'll be really impressed.
All right.
Do you know about a movie named The Stupids?
Yes.
Do you know this?
I've never seen it. Wow.
You've never seen it.
I haven't seen
Okay.
it. No.
I've got a DVD. I don't know if it's survived onto streaming anywhere. Tom Arnold is the star of the movie, and it is just the goofiest, silliest thing. And there's no good there's no good biblical story in it, but there's so many great, just idiotic clips, you know. It drives me crazy, you know, comedies. I love a good comedy, and a stupid comedy can always, you know, it could be the best comedy.
Right, yeah.
And you have all these people going, oh, that's so dumb.
Yeah.
You know, it's so dumb. And you're like, but they're so creative in the way that they do dumb, you know, which is why we love Dumb and Dumber, you know, but The Stupids was like to the next level. So.
Well, that would be a do it for Dumb and Dumber. I've seen, of course, many times. I can't say I've used it in a sermon, so now I feel like the bar has been raised. I'm going to have to figure that out. That'll be good. Oh, now you got me thinking. What would be my go-to? I could ask my congregation. I'm sure they would tell me. They'd be like, "Oh, E.T.
Like
again."
What clip, or is that what you're saying?
Or what movie?
What movie?
They've heard me say E.T. is a Jesus story pretty much every Easter, I think. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for me, the one movie I was going to bring, if we were spending more time on that, would have been Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty much anything.
It's right in the name. I mean.
And it's not even the redemption story in that one, but it is such a powerful movie, and I'm a big Stephen King fan anyway, so.
That was another one, speaking of, kind of like The Iron Giant, that again, when it first came out, it was the underground. Wait,
totally.
You saw that? Oh.
Yeah.
It's
you know, that
amazing.
movie came out at the same time as Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, and Lion King were all in the theater at the same time, and it just got crushed.
Yep.
All good movies. I don't know. I really haven't rewatched Pulp Fiction, to be honest. It's like,
No, once was good.
pretty dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
This is really cool. This is fun.
This is super fun. We'll have to get you back. Make sure
Love
this
to,
isn't
for sure.
a one and done. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be good. Perfect. So thank you all again for continuing to watch and just supporting Curious Faith. If any of this struck a chord for you, would love to get some feedback on that. Any particular movies that you want to make sure that we talk about at some point, or TV shows, let us know as well. Yeah, I suppose
In the YouTube comments, put some movies in there.
Yeah, get those in there, and I will suffer through and somehow watch them all. I will see if I can find time for that. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to have the opportunity. So.
No, yeah, really appreciate it. With that, we'll see you back here next time. Thanks as always for joining us, and take care.
Or bye.
Yeah.